Does everyone see my screen in Quorum Studio and all the code that we're not going to look at yet?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to launch my game here.
And can you blow up that code size just a little when you have a chance?
Yes. Here, I'll do that now so I don't forget. Is that a good size?
Yeah.
Looks great.
Okay. So, this is my game. This is a 2D platformer. One of the things I wanted to do is I really wanted to use the scene editor to build up something in a similar way to that we've been doing throughout the sessions here. But compared to all the top-down RPG stuff, I wanted to hit just a different kind of game. And so I've used the scene to build the sort of foreground area that we're looking at here where my character is, as well as the background that is in the scene that's a separate scene. And using the two scenes, you're going to see that as I move around, the camera moves as I'm moving, and the rate at which the foreground moves is different from the background to create a sort of parallax motion effect. This is sort of thing that you see all the time in 2D games or 3D games that have this sort of like 2D, they often call it like 2D and a half, or like 2.5D, 2.5 dimensions. Just like this idea of you are creating this illusion of 3 dimensions for your 2D game by adjusting the speed at which you are transitioning past these 2 different layers, essentially. As I'm walking around, you can also see that my character is set up to animate using all of the different frames of animation for the girl that we have in our palette. And I've set it up so that as I'm moving around, I have footsteps going, along with this sort of just lovely serene music that I've got. The idea behind this game is that it is a auditory platformer, so everything can be done just by using my eyes, but I also have auditory cues to help me get through the entire game. So one of those is that if I approach the edge of this cliff, you can see that there is the platform I'm currently on. On the left side, there is a cliff that goes steeply upwards. If I run into it, I have a sound that plays to let me know that I've impacted something. If I go over to the other side, I have this sort of just beeping alert sort of sound that indicates that I am approaching the edge of cliff, and if I get right up next to the edge, it gets faster and higher pitch. If I then jump, you can hear that there is this sort of pulsing audio effect that I have that I'm adjusting the pitch, that as I go up and I'm further away from the ground, the further away I am from the ground, the lower the pitch goes, and the pitch goes up, and it gets, therefore it goes faster and it's more frequent beeps as I'm approaching the ground. So what I can do is I can jump up, and you can hear that as the elevation beneath me changes, I can hear the audio change as well to reflect that. So if I go ahead and sort of just start moving through my game, with that audio cue telling me about the elevation in front of me, I can now start to move into, hold on, let me move somewhere around. It's not going to be
Adam, do you mind describing what keys are you using to make your character jump up or move?
So in the game here, I am using my left and right arrow keys to move back and forth, and I am using the space bar to jump up and down. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. The only thing I wanted to ask is sometimes I see your character jumping a little higher than others. So do you hold the space bar down a little longer?
So in this particular game, I could do something like that, but I chose not to. Every time that I jump, I have the same vertical amount of power to each jump, but I can move left or right. That makes it, I have more effective distance out of the jump because of how I'm moving left or right.
Thank you.
While I've been doing this, you've been noticing that the audio changes as the elevation changes. One other thing that changes is that if I change so I am no longer jumping over a platform, but instead, it's very common in platformers that you just have like bottomless pits or the abyss, where if you fall in, then usually it's a game over, or you lose health, or generally it's not conducive to your progress to fall down holes. In my game, if I am jumping over one, I play different audio that informs you when there is no safe ground below you. If there is no solid ground, I play different kinds of audio. And if I go down simple, the pitch changes. So once again, the higher the pitch gets, the faster the pulses come, the closer I am to falling down into this hole. And when I fall down, I also have my code set up to put me back from wherever I jumped from, or if I just walk off, wherever I walked off from. So I have all of this sort of reset and respawn code. For my particular game, I don't have any health. You don't game over if you fall down holes. It's intentional that this is, it's allowed to be trial and error sort of gameplay. So I can move forward. And suppose that I'm doing this, I'm not using my sight, I'm just doing this by audio cues. If I go up here, I know that there's a cliff here, and so I can jump. But maybe I don't jump and I decide to just walk straight forward. I have a cue that lets me know I just hit the side of a platform, I respawn, and actually I respawned on the next platform due to what appears to be a bug in my code. But that's okay. For this one here in particular, this being just this rather long jump, it can be kind of nerve-wracking too. You're not looking, you just go, and I can see I'm at the edge, I jump. It's not until I'm right about on the platform that I get the auditory feedback that I was about to land, so there's a pretty close jump. I'm gonna go ahead and progress forward in my game. And as you can see, I mentioned this before, but in the background, I have my scene. This is the second scene that I made with the scene editor. I'm moving at a different rate with the camera, so it makes it seem as though it is far away and distant, and it's getting this sort of parallax motion effect. On the other side of this jump here, I have a switch. And just besides that, on the far right side of the screen, there is this stone gate that I have built. And if I get closer to the switch, I'll get an auditory cue. Sort of clicking sound is just indicating to me that there is the switch here. And I don't think it'll come through Zoom, but this has both it's sound that is based on distance, the farther away I am from it, volume changes, but this also has directional audio. So this is coming through primarily my right ear right now. If I go ahead and run into the switch, play an audio cue, I remove the gate, and I can progress further in my game. If I go further forward, I have another audio cue here. Right now I have this sort of shimmery effect that's telling me that there's a power-up nearby. Reasonably, I could just walk right past this. And if I don't have this power-up, it's going to be very bad, because if I try and go for this next switch over here, I can hear there's a switch over there. I get the auditory cue, but I can't actually reach it from where I am right now. But if I get this power-up, which again, this has directional audio on it, as well as volume that changes as I get closer or farther away, I grab it.
You found a weapon. Use A and D to throw daggers left and right, or W and S to throw daggers up or down. Use the daggers to hit far away switches.
I had originally intended that I was going to be using the notify calls that I think we talked about this a little bit in the advanced group, but basically we can send messages directly to the screen reader in Quorum. I opted not to use that just because we've been having on and off problems with it, and because the rest of the game is auditory, it felt natural to have text-to-speech in here as well for everybody, to just sort of give instructions, and then I don't separately like output it or anything. But basically, I picked up a power-up. This is giving me the option to throw daggers, so I can sort of throw daggers in any direction I want here. As they impact things, or as they go off the top or bottoms of the screen, the game removes them automatically. And importantly, I need them because I can do something like this, where I'm at the edge of the platform. I know from experience that jumping here is not going to get me to the switch, but if I toss a dagger, switch triggers, I created this new platform, and so this is now a solid surface to walk over. And I jumped over this previously, and it was giving me notifications there is no ground here. But now there is, so now I don't have that audio anymore. And I'm getting the correct audio that this is, in fact, a solid surface. If I keep going, I'm going further down here. And as something I just want to draw attention to, so far this game has been entirely linear. I can only go to the right, or not that I can only go to the right, I can go to the left, but there are portions of the train where it's actually too high to go back the way I came. And this is going to be important. I call this out for a reason later. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump over here. And one of the things I want to comment on while I'm doing this is just that this is by far the most complicated level I have ever made in any game I've ever done in Quorum. This is basically because I could just use the scene editor to build all this, and I did not have to write code for every single one of these blocks. Not to mention the background behind it. Here I have another switch. I can tell by the directional audio and the volume that I'm close to it. It's about centered coming from both ears right now, so it's got to be nearby. There's a gate here I can't get through, but if I hit that up there, I can proceed further through. Here, I can hear there's another switch. This is also another example of a place that I cannot return from where I came from. So I need to present, I can only go further forward at this point. I can use as a gate switch somewhere nearby. As I've jumped over the pit, it's gotten farther away. So I'm going to go ahead and toss a dagger downward. And I have this sort of quasi-cave looking sort of terrain here. And inside, I've dropped down into this hole. Again, I can't return the way I came from, but I have this sort of potion looking item here. As I get closer, I can hear the power up again.
You've unlocked the double jump. Use it to jump in midair and return to the start.
And so I'm going to do a classic move in game development known as reusing all of your work. I make the player go through all of my level again so I can get twice as much use out of it without making more. So I can actually return. And now with the double jump, I also play different audio for the first and second jump, just trying to give you as much auditory feedback as possible. With the double jump, I can't jump more than once. It does check to make sure you're only jumping twice and it's not letting you jump more than that. And now I can enjoy all of this idyllic scenery that I have in my level again. And at this point, all the switches are open. There's nothing else that I have to open, although I reasonably could have programmed this so that new obstacles appeared, or originally when I made the daggers, the intention was, what's the most obvious reason you have a weapon? Well, it's because you're going to go fight monsters with it. So I'd originally expected that there could be NPCs that you might attack, or enemies that you might need to defeat. I ended up removing that because I thought there were other things that I could do with my limited time that were interesting, in terms of stuff like the double jump. And also just because it takes a lot of time to get that, and there's limited time during Epic to make stuff like hostile enemies and giving you a health bar and whatnot. Now if I return all the way here to the start, there's a power up here that wasn't here before. If I jump up to it, which again, I couldn't reach this with my single jump, but if I did the double jump, I can. I get the cue, or the audio cue, and I'm going to warn you ahead of time, I did not reduce the volume of the sound because I thought it would cheapen the moment.
Congratulations. You've won.
So that is the game that I have made, this audio platformer. Before I close this and start talking about code, is there any questions?
I think it's amazing. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, how did it do the jumps? I'm just thinking of all the collision events firing.
How did it do the jumps?
Yep.
Yeah, so the way that I have it set up right now, there are a lot of objects in this scene. And so the way that I have it set up, one of the hardest things in this program was to make it so that if you press spacebar, it's not hard to set a Boolean to say, okay, stop. You're not allowed to press the spacebar anymore to jump, right? So I press the space, and until I land, I'm not supposed to be able to jump again. The difficulty comes from, how do I know when I've landed? I can say, like, have a collision event and say, if you have touched something else, you're allowed to jump again. But what if I touch something like the side of the wall? I don't want you to be able to, like, you could do that in some games where you could do like wall jumping, but I'm not trying to let you do that in this. I really specifically want you to touch the ground again before you're allowed to jump. And so a lot of that came down to the design of my levels. Throughout the entirety of the levels, all of the walkable platforms have either been a specific dirt with grass tile, or they've been those stone blocks that I use for the bridges. And I very specifically check, if you touched one of those, and if you specifically touched the top half of it from more or less above, then I say, okay, you've landed, you're allowed to get your jump back. And this is some of the code that I can talk about here. Let me go to some of that collision code. And this is a pretty long program. This is also more content in a single main than I usually have, just because of the way that I wrote this particular class. I have a few extra classes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classes in this project. Of those 7 classes, by far the majority of this is in main.quorum. Most of the other classes are relatively short. Inside my begin collision, though, I can see that I have, actually, let me turn on NVDA at this point so I can relay this to the screen as well.
Welcome to, okay, Quorum Studio 2.0.2.
So in my code, I do a couple of things here. If you are already in midair, you can be in midair for one of two reasons. You either press the space bar or you walked off a platform, in which case I have to do some separate checks to make sure that the jumping flag gets triggered, so you can't like walk off things and then jump in midair before you get the double jump. The way that I do this is with
If left paren, other colon get name left paren, right paren, colon contains left paren, floor tile name right paren, or other colon get name left paren, right paren, colon contains left paren, bridge tile name right paren, right paren.
really long conditional. But I basically check to see, did you touch a specific tile that I have designated to be the floor? And if so, I also check to see in this
If left paren,
statement.
jumping equals true right paren, and left paren, player colon get y left paren, right paren, greater left paren.
You don't need to hear all of the exact code that I'm using to get the y and the height, but basically just checking to see, are you already jumping? Are you approaching it? So the player's y is coming from above the halfway mark of the height of the block. I use that as a sort of approximation. Didn't work perfectly. You actually saw this at one point in the demo. I like hit the very, very top edge, but the side of a platform. And I couldn't have actually gotten up. I fell down, but when I respawned, it used the same code. And so it actually put me on top of the platform that I sort of smacked my face into the side of. So the code's not perfect, but it works pretty well overall. Any other? Yeah.
So you have a scene, two scene files.
Yes.
And then do you need to do something to show both files at the same time, or?
Yeah, so what I've done here is in my code, there's not a way in Quorum Studio to create using the GUI to create a new scene, but you can go make a new scene and put it into the folder and it'll be there, it'll be accessible. And so in my code, the way this looks is, the raw code for it is pretty simple. I already have this
Code tabs tab control. File colon set path left paren, quote scene, load scene left paren.
I do the exact same thing.
File colon set path left paren, quote scene slash background scene dot qs quote right paren.
I do the exact same thing with the other scene. I just load it again. The thing that makes it stand out is that if I actually go to my
image items view platform resources, name project name so open edit items view, see yes and notepad quote
if I
quote
actually look at the scene, the one thing that I did to make sure this would go on a different layer,
quote name quote colon quote background layer quote comma selected.
The default one goes on the default layer 2D, but I made sure that this went on a separate layer because I very explicitly wanted this to be used at the same time in a different layer. And if you look at the actual scenes,
Quorum Studio 2.0 code tabs tab control.
This is the scene where I have all of my gameplay elements on it, and you can see that there's no background whatsoever. It doesn't have any of the grass or the trees or the rocks and just the various knickknacks that I have there. This is just the platforms of the level and the different items I have as power-ups. Whereas if I look at the background scene,
code tabs tab control.
This by far would have been impossible for me to do last epic because, oh my goodness, I am not placing this many trees and grass and water and just like there are hundreds and hundreds of items in just this background thing. These are no game elements. None of this has any bearing on gameplay at all. It's purely visual fluff. But I built all this up so that I'd have this nice sort of parallax motion going that I think adds something to the visual presentation of the game.
Let's say that, so, okay, can you, so my thinking is that you can create one scene in one project and then create another scene in another project.
Yep.
Can we import that scene file from the another project into the, the main project that you are working on?
Yeah, absolutely. If you make a scene file, that scene file is not inherently linked to any particular project. You can totally make one in one project and use it in any other project you want.
And then just set the layer.
You can share them with each other. You can post them on GitHub. You can send them to each other. Scene files are just scene files. They can be loaded in any game, in any project, in any way you want.
Can I ask about the sky?
Yes.
William, you had a sky on the very top of the scene,
Main.quorum
the clouds and the sky.
Yeah, so that's 100% true. Because I didn't have this one in the palette, I brought this one in manually. I went and found some open source art that I could use. And the way that I've got it here is I manually made a drawable.
Drawable sky one.
And in this drawable, I loaded it. I actually used the same image twice and just flipped it and then used them next to each other to extend the distance of my clouds in the background. Because the single image wasn't long enough for the really long background scene. The background scene is something like 3,000 or so pixels long, and I only had like about 2,000 pixels worth of cloud, so I just kind of mirrored it, flopped it over. But I added both of those to the scene, and because in the area up above, I'd gotten the layer that the background scene was on.
Sky background layer : add left paren 0, sky 1 right paren.
The background layer allows you to add things, or any layer allows you to add things to it, just in general. But in particular, if you really want to put something in a particular place, I could have given this a different Z value, a different depth buffer value, so it would have been drawn further back. But the way that I opted to do it for this one was I just added it directly to the layer, and I slotted it in at the very beginning of the list, so it got rendered before everything else. So everything else got rendered on top of it.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else that anyone has questions about before? There's not a ton that I want to talk about in the code, just because the code is.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
And I should maybe know this, but I'm curious, how many frames per second do you get with this many images and stuff?
That's a great question. I actually don't know that, but I could find out. Let's go ahead and add an FPS label to the game, and we'll see.
I was just curious.
F-E-F-E-R-E-F-B-S.
I think it should be good
Right
to just
paren.
add this directly to the game with nothing else, and it should.
Build successful in 0.08 seconds. Game window.
FPS. Yeah, I'm just
Not
north of
bad.
60 frames per second. I'm 67, 69, 68.
It's not bad at all.
Yeah, so this is actually running about as well as a lot of professionally made games that I run on this computer, because this is my primary computer that I like play games on and stuff. So,
Will
yeah,
that,
so just
sorry.
Yeah.
Will that frame rate actually hold up when you actually perform an action in here?
I think it will. Yeah, let me go ahead and oh, the FPS is sort of staying stationary there because I'm not changing its position. I'm moving the camera away. It's kind of funny, but yeah, as I'm moving around, as a matter of fact, it's periodically going up above 70 here. If anything, moving is making my performance higher. Although realistically, that's probably just random noise in how the process runs. But yeah, even when I'm doing stuff. Yeah.
William, do you mind showing me just the part of the code that you added the animation? I noticed the character that you have, the legs are kind of moving, and it gives the
Quorum
illusion
Studio
that it's
2.2.
running.
Yeah, so the way that I'm doing that is I have an array where I've gone and I've loaded in each of the different images that are used in this running animation. So
Tab pane tab control. Code tabs tab. Scene palette tree expanded.
These are the exact same frames of animation that are already in the palette, right? All I've done is I've gone and I've grabbed them from the file, I've loaded them in code, and then inside my code,
code tabs tab
in my update action, where I did a lot of stuff in my update action for this particular game just because it was convenient. But in here, we have some code for if the player linear velocity is not equal to 0. So basically, is the player running left or right? And I double check to make sure they're not jumping. If they're jumping through the air, I don't change them. I don't want them to be running through the air. In that case, I have a timer that I have. So on every frame of animation, I check to see there's a timer. Is it 0 yet? If not, go ahead and decrease it some more. And once it does get down to 0, I take the next frame of animation that I've got in my array and I swap it out. So I had that exact same image, and I just tell it load a different drawable instead. And I just continuously with the timer go and check to see, is it time to put up the new frame? If it is, change it to the next one, then wait a second, then put up the next one, and then so on.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yep. I see that there's something in chat. It's a little inconvenient for me to see
Stop
chat
share left
while I'm
paren.
sharing the screen.
Remote menu chat quorum.
Yes, this is something that this is going to be, the plan is to put this on a public repository so that anyone that wants this can clone this through Quorum Studio, just using the version control stuff, and can take a crack at it. We don't have it up yet, but we're going to. Is there any other questions about this?
Just real quick,
when you jump, can you control your character in the air with the
Yes.
direction keys?
Yeah, you can. And so I could have changed that, but it would actually be more work to turn that off than it would be to just leave it in. And I think that it's pretty common in platformers that you can do that, and it feels better, I think.
It would be
So
way harder too if you
it
could.
would be for sure. No. Unless there's any other questions that people have right now, there's one thing in particular that I would like to talk about in terms of this code, in terms of things that I personally found to be really difficult and I had to put some brain power into. And it's one of the things that I think is the most important in terms of the accessibility features I have for this game. And I don't think that this game is perfectly accessible by any means, but I think that it is playable. I, a very biased person who built the entire game and knows where everything is, I did try and play it all the way through just with eyes closed and listening, which is not the same as actually having a visually impaired user play it. But I could actually play it all the way through. Seems to be usable for sure. But one of the things that was most important for actually making it usable was this sense of, I'm about to go off the edge of the cliff. I need to let the user know, hey, you're standing at the edge, right? And also, in addition to that, the sense of, I'm currently jumping. Am I about to fall down a bottomless hole, or am I about to land on something? Figuring that stuff out was one of the hardest things about this entire project. And so in order to get that going,
A, C, T, N. Quorum Studio 2 points. Video layout. Show Quorum Studio.
Typing in right now.
Find A, C, I, space. D, T, R. Next button. Code tabs tab control. Main.quorum tab. Action load.
So in my code, I have this action I call load terrain. And the hardest part about this was making it so I had a sense of whether or not there was anything below me at any point in time, or if I was about to go off an edge. The way that I did that was, I thought to myself that the entire game I have lined out on this grid, right, in the scenes. And so I know that any given point in this grid is going to either have a floor tile or it's not going to have a floor tile, right? And so I iterate through every single item in the game once at the very beginning, similar to what we did in the advanced group when we were kind of going through our stuff. I go through every single thing, and for each of those very specific floor tiles that I know exist, that I use in my collision code, I get its height at the position of that thing, and then I have an array that literally just represents the grid tiles from the very left to the very right side of my screen. And in my array, I just slot, okay, at the first tile's position, the height of my map is whatever, like 200 or something. And the next one, it's 200 because it's flat. So there's just 200, 200, 200. And then there are no tiles ever in this next grid space. And so by default, I just set every spot in the array to be -1. And anytime I'm ever doing some code where I'm checking to see, hey, the player is moving through the air right now, should I be updating their sound? Should I be telling them that they're at an edge, or that they're currently over, like they're jumping and they're over something, or they're not over something? I'm going back to my array where I figured out once before, is there anything there? And I'm just constantly looking up, is there any terrain at this X position? Is there any terrain at this other X position? And just constantly updating that. And when I make something like the bridge, I actually go back and I update that array one more time, where I go and say, okay, I know I just added floor tiles at these positions, so go update that array. And it gets used all over the place for all kinds of accessibility features that you really couldn't play the game without. So, and that was by far the hardest thing here.
So William,
Yes.
For us who just have our flat maps,
Mhm.
we do something very similar and say, as long as my character is on dirt, this walking sound is happening. And if they go off of dirt,
So this is something that we talked about a little bit earlier today in the advanced group, and not very much, but like, yeah, this idea of, I really want to be able to play walking sounds while I'm moving around. What should that sound be, right? And I think that the way that I would do it, and it would be quite difficult to do in terms of code compared to the stuff that we were doing during the sessions, but what I would do is I would make a 2-dimensional array, or in other words, it's an array of arrays of integer values. And so basically you want to be able to say, at grid position 0, 0, there is something I want to store. And for grid position 1, 0, and for 1, 1, and for just every single slot in the grid. And what I would do is go to each of those things, set them to some default value. It has no sound by default. and then iterate through every single thing in the game and find out which tiles live in which grid spaces. And if it is, oh, this one says it's dirt and it lives at grid coordinate 20, I'm going to give this one the audio for dirt, or I'm going to give it a value, like a code that I put in that I know represents dirt audio when the player is moving around, and then do that for every single one. It's a lot more complicated than anything we were doing during the sessions, but it's totally doable in the system.
Okay.
See,
Thanks.
that's kind of why I made a comment to you, and I was talking to Stefik
Yeah.
during our interview about being able to attach audio sounds to a tile.
It would be.
I think it would reduce so much of this overhead to be able
It's
to
a really
make an
common thing
accessible
you'd like to
game.
do that you don't necessarily want to have to go write really complicated code for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And especially for making accessible games, it's like it would reduce so much of this overhead too.
So in terms of what I really wanted to show you guys, that's the core of it. That's the gist of it. Is if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take other questions. Or if we want to take this time and start showing off people's games, if anyone wants to, I'm totally down with that too.
All right. Well, hearing nothing, why don't we?
Actually,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead. Do
I
it.
meant I was trying to hit the
You're waiting the buzzer out.
speak button. Yep. So I do have a question. How long
Sure.
did it take you to write all of this, to make this whole thing?
I have been writing this game since Sunday when we had the like help set up. You could come talk to us on Zoom and we'd help you get set up with stuff. I have been doing this basically every night after we finish our sessions. I've been working on this each night for about a week.
Okay. And so like 3 hours, 4 hours a night, give or take. Okay. Wow. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when you really think about it, sounds like a lot, but like actually that's very little code time, right? That's like just
That's maybe 28 hours.
Probably not even that, right? Probably like closer to 20, maybe.
About in there, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't time myself while doing it, unfortunately.
So, when you think about it, like a lot of AAA games, they have budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like with the Old Republic, I think was like, I don't know, 200 million, 300 million, something like that. I forget the exact number, but like, so the nice thing about a system like this, you can actually put together games, 20 hours for one person. It's really not bad at all. So you can put together something relatively sophisticated very, very quickly. This actually came out a lot cooler than I would have imagined. I haven't seen it yet, so.
I very specifically didn't show it to Stepik after the first day. He knew I was making a platformer, and that was it.
Yeah, that's all I knew. I'm pretty impressed, dude. I think it's awesome. So.
I have another question.
Yes.
So, if I'm just reminded of, I grew up playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and
Sure.
so this reminded me a lot of that. And then, what if could you, as you got to the end of a scene, or I'm sorry, you went from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen.
Yeah.
Could you then be going into the castle so your background scene would change?
Totally. Yeah, you could absolutely do stuff like that where you either want to like dynamically change the background, or you like say you finish stage 1, you're going stage 2.
Yeah.
You can totally do that sort of stuff where each scene is its own stage, and then you'd have to go and get rid of whatever the old stuff is that you don't want anymore, just kind of like iterating through and blowing it away. But yeah, you could totally use scenes for that sort of stuff. And if I hadn't gone for the particular route I did, I considered making different scenes for stages, but I kind of decided to just go all out on one. But yeah, you can totally use a scene system to do like level editing and then have different stages and load them as you're going.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think when we were building the scene system, I think that's kind of what we suspected people would do, is that like they would build out like a level, kind of like what William's doing, and then if they want to make like a full-on game that they're selling or something, they'll make like 20 more scenes, and then anytime they add to their game, it's just a new scene, but they have the same logic or similar. So this kind of thing is exactly what you can use it for, and you can make as many as you want and share them however you want, and so yeah, definitely use them. So
nice. That was something that I loved about Sonic the Hedgehog and Golden Axe, was they were simple enough graphics. It was left to right, and for as low vision as I was as a kid, I could do some damage, you know. But as soon as it went to 3D gaming, I couldn't find myself in space, and I kind of stopped. So.
Well, ironically enough, so William hasn't mentioned it, but we are really close to finishing the 3D version of the scene editor too. We actually have it working internally, but the what are we waiting for? We're trying to finish the cursor, right? Isn't that what we
Yeah, basically we have to get all the cursor features in for 3D as well as fix what
because
is
the
a little
debate
bit
is like,
funky in 2D.
yeah, because the debate is like, well, what should the keys be? How should they work? What happens if you press this one? So should it be mapped to World of Warcraft keys? Should it be mapped to up and down, left and right?
Internally, we were using WASD space and X because literally it's just I play World of Warcraft, and it's like, well, if you're trying to use the keys to move around in World of Warcraft, that's what you do. So
yeah, but I guess my point is that this is going 3D pretty soon, and you should be able. The scene files already work with 3D, so
Awesome.
In theory, next year it's possible we could do the same type of thing that we did this, but it's all 3D instead of 2D or something. Who knows?
Cool.
Anyway.
If you need guinea pigs, let me know.
Sure. Yeah, we certainly do. We always send this to a couple testers. More than likely, what we'll I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but there's a magic thing you can do in Quorum Studio now. That's basically live on the bleeding edge, and you set this little flag in your Quorum Studio installation called beta. You just set it to true, and if you do that, anytime we put out a patch on our beta servers, which are kind of behind the scenes, use the same login and all that stuff, and it'll magically patch you to sort of the latest version that is not public. And that would allow you to use any of our 3D stuff as we build it. So obviously it's not out yet, but like for anybody that already has Quorum Studio now, from here on in perpetuity, as far as we can tell, at least that's the plan right now, you can set this beta flag and you'll get the latest for that kind of stuff to test it out. So now, to be clear, beta means what it means, right? Like just because it's on the servers as a beta doesn't mean everything works how users would want. Oftentimes in beta, people send us email and they're like, hey, this doesn't do what I want. And we say, oh yeah, right, that's broken. So that happens. Like I know we broke, what was it? Tim Lockwood messaged us, was like, hey, you broke Legos on the beta. And we're like, oh, so we did, so.
It's a good thing he told us that, because it would have been really bad if we came back.
It would have been, because none of us knew, so. Yeah. That was my fault, actually. I accidentally deleted a line of code that was really important line of code. So anyway, yeah.
So at this point, unless there's any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and take this down. And how do we want to wrap up, Andy?